There exists among us a group of people who see the world in ways that others cannot understand, who perceive patterns and possibilities that remain invisible to most minds, who live so deeply in the realm of potential that they often struggle to function in the realm of the actual. Carl Jung identified these individuals as introverted intuitives, and he understood better than anyone the profound challenges they face in a world that values extroversion, concrete thinking, and immediate practical results. Jung himself was an introverted intuitive, and through his own struggles and through his work with countless patients who shared this psychological type, he mapped the unique territory of a mind that operates primarily through inner vision, symbolic thinking, and an almost mystical connection to the unconscious patterns that shape human experience. If you've ever felt like you don't quite fit in this world, if you've been told you're too sensitive, too impractical, too lost in your own thoughts, if you see meanings and connections that others miss, but struggle to translate your insights into language others can understand, then you may be one of Jung's introverted intuitives, living a life that is both blessed and cursed by the depth of your inner perception. The introverted intuitive lives primarily in the world of possibilities, patterns, and potential rather than in the world of concrete facts and immediate sensory experience. While others focus on what is, the introverted intuitive is constantly aware of what could be, what might emerge, what hidden potentials are waiting to unfold. This is both their greatest gift and their greatest burden. They see the oak tree in the acorn, the symphony in the scattered notes, the revolution in the whispered conversation. But they often struggle to convince others of the reality and importance of what they perceive, and they frequently feel isolated in their understanding of the deeper currents that move beneath the surface of everyday life. Let me tell you about Sarah, a gifted introverted intuitive who perfectly exemplifies both the struggles and the profound contributions of this psychological type. Sarah worked as a marketing analyst for a large corporation, a job that required her to deal with concrete data, immediate deadlines, and practical business objectives. But Sarah's mind didn't naturally operate in these concrete, linear ways. When she looked at market research data, she didn't just see numbers and trends. She saw the deeper psychological currents driving consumer behavior, the emerging cultural shifts that hadn't yet manifested in the data, the potential for revolutionary changes in how people would relate to products and brands in the future. Sarah's insights were often brilliant and eventually proved accurate, but they were difficult for her colleagues to understand or implement. She would present ideas that seemed to come from nowhere, connections that weren't obvious, strategies that felt risky because they were based on patterns that others couldn't see. Her supervisors appreciated her creativity, but often found her impractical. Her colleagues respected her intelligence, but sometimes felt frustrated by her inability to focus on immediate, concrete tasks. Sarah herself felt constantly misunderstood, like she was speaking a different language from everyone around her. If this is speaking to you, take a moment and subscribe. Thank you. This is the central challenge of the introverted intuitive. They operate from a fundamentally different mode of consciousness than the majority of people, and they live in a world designed for those who think in concrete, practical, immediate terms. Jung understood that introverted intuitives are guided by what he called the transcendent function, a psychological process that bridges conscious and unconscious material to generate new insights and possibilities. This function allows them to perceive patterns and potentials that are invisible to more concrete-minded individuals, but it also makes them seem impractical, unrealistic, or even unstable to those who don't share their way of perceiving. The introverted intuitive mind is constantly processing vast amounts of unconscious information, picking up subtle cues and patterns that others miss, synthesizing seemingly unrelated information into new insights and visions. This is exhausting work that happens largely below the level of consciousness, which is why introverted intuitives often feel drained by social interaction and need significant alone time to process their perceptions. Unlike extroverted intuitives, who are energized by sharing their insights with others and seeing them implemented in the external world, Introverted intuitives are more focused on understanding and developing their insights internally. They're less concerned with immediate practical application and more interested in the deeper significance and meaning of what they perceive. This internal focus can make introverted intuitives seem aloof, distant, or impractical to others. They may appear to be daydreaming when they're actually engaged in complex internal processing. They may seem uninterested in practical matters when they're actually exploring the deeper implications of those matters. The difficulty is compounded by the fact that introverted intuitives often struggle to communicate their insights in ways that others can understand and appreciate. Their perceptions are holistic, symbolic, and often nonverbal, making it challenging to translate them into the linear, concrete language that most people prefer. Jung observed that introverted intuitives often feel like strangers in their own culture, as if they belong to a different time or place. They may feel more connected to ideas, possibilities, and potential futures than to the present moment and its immediate demands. This can lead to what Jung called the problem of the misunderstood genius. The introverted intuitive may have profound insights and visionary ideas, but they struggle to find ways to make these insights relevant and useful in their current environment. They may feel like they're constantly trying to explain colors to people who only see in black and white. Consider the case of Michael, an introverted intuitive who worked as a software engineer but dreamed of becoming a writer. Michael's technical work was competent but uninspired, while his real passion lay in exploring the deeper meanings and patterns he perceived in human experience. Michael wrote complex, layered stories that explored psychological and spiritual themes, but he struggled to find readers who appreciated the depth and subtlety of his work. Publishers found his writing too philosophical, too removed from immediate practical concerns, too focused on internal rather than external action. Meanwhile, Michael felt increasingly frustrated and depressed in his engineering job, which required him to focus on concrete, immediate problems rather than the larger patterns and possibilities that naturally engaged his mind. He felt like he was wasting his life on trivial matters while his deeper insights went unexpressed and unappreciated. This is another common struggle for introverted intuitives. They often feel called to work that allows them to explore and express their deeper insights, but they struggle to find ways to make such work economically viable or socially acceptable. The world rewards practical, immediate results, not visionary thinking or deep pattern recognition. Jung understood that this disconnect between the introverted intuitive's natural gifts and society's demands often leads to what he called the sacrifice of the inferior function. The introverted intuitive may be forced to spend most of their time and energy developing their least natural abilities: concrete thinking, practical implementation, immediate results, while their greatest gifts remain underdeveloped and unrecognized. This sacrifice comes at enormous psychological cost. The introverted intuitive who spends their life trying to function as an extrovert or a practical thinker often experiences depression, anxiety, and a profound sense of meaninglessness. They feel like they're living someone else's life, cut off from their authentic nature and deepest source of vitality. The introverted intuitive's relationship with time is also fundamentally different from most people's. While others focus on immediate tasks and short-term goals, introverted intuitives naturally think in longer cycles and see the present moment as part of larger unfolding patterns. This can make them seem procrastinating or unfocused when they're actually waiting for the right moment for their insights to emerge or be implemented. They understand intuitively that timing is crucial, that ideas and possibilities have their own organic development cycle that can't be forced or rushed. But in a culture that values immediate results and constant productivity, this natural rhythm can be seen as laziness or lack of motivation. The introverted intuitive may be criticized for not being goal-oriented enough, not being practical enough, not being immediate enough in their approach to life and work. Jung also recognized that introverted intuitives often struggle with what he called the tyranny of possibilities. Because they can see so many potential paths and outcomes, they may have difficulty making concrete decisions or committing to specific courses of action. While others might see a limited number of options in any situation, the introverted intuitive sees an almost infinite array of possibilities, each with its own potential implications and consequences. This can lead to analysis paralysis, where the introverted intuitive becomes so aware of all the possible outcomes that they struggle to choose any particular path. This is not indecisiveness in the usual sense, but rather a form of paralysis that comes from seeing too much rather than too little. The introverted intuitive's gift for perceiving possibilities becomes a burden when those possibilities multiply beyond the point where practical action becomes possible. Another significant challenge for introverted intuitives is their relationship with their physical body and immediate environment. Because they live so much in the realm of ideas and possibilities, they may neglect their physical needs, their health, their immediate surroundings. Jung observed that many introverted intuitives struggle with what he called inferior sensation. They may be so focused on internal patterns and possibilities that they neglect basic self-care, forget to eat regularly, ignore their physical environment, or fail to notice concrete details that others consider important. This can make them seem absent-minded, impractical, or even irresponsible to others. Family members and friends may be frustrated by the introverted intuitive's tendency to forget practical matters, miss concrete details, or seem disconnected from immediate physical reality. But Jung understood that this is not a character flaw or a lack of intelligence. It's simply the natural result of consciousness being so focused on one mode of perception, intuitive understanding, that other modes receive less attention and development. The challenge for the introverted intuitive is learning to develop their inferior functions without betraying their natural gifts. This requires finding ways to ground their insights in practical reality without losing the visionary perspective that is their greatest strength. Let me share the story of Elena, an introverted intuitive who found a way to bridge this gap between vision and practical application. Elena was a natural systems thinker who could see the deeper patterns in organizational behavior and social dynamics, but she struggled in traditional corporate environments where her insights seemed too abstract and long-term to be immediately useful. Elena's breakthrough came when she discovered the field of organizational development, where her ability to perceive deep patterns and long-term trends was not only valued but essential. She learned to translate her intuitive insights into concrete recommendations and practical interventions, but in a context where visionary thinking was appreciated rather than dismissed. Elena developed what she called applied intuition, learning to ground her deepest insights in research, data, and practical methodologies without losing the essential vision that made her insights valuable. She found ways to communicate her perceptions in language that practical-minded people could understand and implement. This is one path forward for introverted intuitives. Finding contexts and communities where their natural gifts are valued and learning to develop their practical skills in service of their deeper vision rather than as a replacement for it. Jung also understood that introverted intuitives often struggle with loneliness and isolation, not just because they need significant alone time, but because their way of perceiving and understanding the world is fundamentally different from most people's. They may feel like they're speaking a different language, perceiving a different reality, operating from a different set of values and priorities than the people around them. This can lead to a profound sense of existential loneliness, a feeling of being fundamentally misunderstood and unappreciated. The introverted intuitive may have many acquaintances but few deep friendships, because it's difficult to find people who can appreciate and understand their particular way of seeing and being in the world. They may feel like they have to hide or suppress their deepest insights in order to fit in socially. But Jung also discovered that when introverted intuitives do find others who share their way of perceiving, other intuitives, creative individuals, people engaged in spiritual or philosophical pursuits, the connections can be extraordinarily deep and meaningful. These relationships are often based on shared understanding of subtle patterns and meanings, rather than shared activities or practical concerns. The introverted intuitive may find that they can communicate with certain individuals on levels that feel almost telepathic, sharing insights and perceptions that don't need to be fully explained to be understood. Jung believed that introverted intuitives often serve a crucial function in society as what he called cultural pioneers. They perceive emerging trends, potential crises, and new possibilities before they become obvious to the general population. Throughout history, many introverted intuitives have been prophets, visionaries, artists, and innovators who saw what was coming before others and helped prepare society for necessary changes and developments. But this pioneering role comes with significant personal cost. The introverted intuitive often feels burdened by their perceptions, especially when they see potential problems or crises that others can't yet see or don't want to acknowledge. They may feel like Cassandra, cursed with accurate prophecy that no one believes until it's too late. This can lead to a sense of responsibility and even guilt about their inability to convince others of what they perceive. Jung understood that the path of individuation for the introverted intuitive involves learning to honor their natural gifts while developing enough practical skill to make their insights accessible and useful to others. This doesn't mean becoming someone they're not, but rather learning to build bridges between their inner vision and outer reality. It means finding ways to serve their deeper calling while still functioning effectively in the practical world. For some introverted intuitives, this might mean finding work in fields that naturally value visionary thinking. Research, innovation, creative arts, counseling, spiritual guidance, or social change. For others, it might mean learning to integrate their intuitive gifts into more conventional roles, finding ways to apply their pattern recognition and systems thinking to practical problems and immediate challenges. The key is not to abandon their natural way of perceiving and understanding, but to find authentic ways to express it that serve both their own development and the needs of their community. Jung also emphasized that introverted intuitives need to develop what he called conscious relationship with their intuitive function. Rather than being overwhelmed by the constant stream of insights and possibilities, they need to learn to work consciously with their intuitive perceptions. This involves developing discrimination about which insights are worth pursuing, learning to test their perceptions against reality, and finding ways to ground their visions in practical understanding. It also involves learning to trust their intuitive process while not being enslaved by it. The introverted intuitive needs to develop enough ego strength to choose which possibilities to follow and which to let go, rather than being pulled in all directions by the constant flow of potential they perceive. Perhaps most importantly, Jung understood that introverted intuitives need to find ways to value and honor their own unique gifts, even when those gifts are not appreciated or understood by others. This requires developing what Jung called inner authority, the ability to validate their own perceptions and insights rather than constantly seeking external approval or confirmation. The introverted intuitive must learn to trust that their way of seeing and understanding has value, even when it differs from the mainstream, even when it seems impractical, even when others can't immediately see its relevance or importance. This inner validation is crucial because the introverted intuitive will always be somewhat out of step with conventional thinking and mainstream values. Their contribution to the world depends on their ability to maintain their unique perspective rather than conforming to more common ways of thinking and perceiving. Jung's message to introverted intuitives was both challenging and encouraging. Your life will always be somewhat difficult because you perceive and value things that most people cannot see or appreciate. But your perceptions are not less real or less valuable because others don't share them. The world needs your ability to see patterns and possibilities that others miss. It needs your vision of what could be, your understanding of deeper meanings and connections, your perception of the longer rhythms and cycles that shape human experience. Your challenge is not to become someone else, but to find ways to honor your authentic nature while developing the practical skills necessary to make your insights accessible and useful to others. The difficult life of the introverted intuitive is not a life to be escaped from, but a life to be lived with greater consciousness, greater skill, and greater appreciation for the unique gifts that make the difficulty worthwhile. You see what others cannot see. You understand what others cannot understand. You perceive possibilities that others cannot imagine. This is both your burden and your blessing, both your challenge and your calling. The world is a richer place because introverted intuitives exist to perceive and express the deeper patterns and possibilities that shape human experience. Your difficult life serves a purpose that extends far beyond your personal happiness or comfort. Jung's invitation to introverted intuitives is to embrace this difficulty not as a problem to be solved, but as a calling to be fulfilled, a unique way of being human that contributes something essential to the larger patterns of human development and understanding.